For today's Client Enrichment Series presentation, Workplace Innovation Lab Insights and Applications, I'd like to introduce you to our presenters. Ryan Doffler is the Director for the Center for Integrated Solutions in the PBS Office of the Chief Architect. Ryan assists federal agencies in identifying workplace arrangements that support employees' work practices and achieve agency business goals. Past client agencies include Federal Aviation Administration, the Department of Health and Human Services, and the Department of Homeland Security. Ryan also teaches a workplace strategy class called Leading Workplace Engagements, develops tools and applications, publications that GSA employees and other federal agencies can use to further federal workplace programs. His most recent tool is the Workplace Investment and Feasibility Modeling Tool, aka WIFM. Ryan is a native Californian, born in Oakland. However, he considers Hawaii his home, as he lived there from the time he was 10 until the time he was 21. He studied political science and economics at the University of Colorado in Boulder, graduating in 1990. He started working for GSA right out of college, and he currently lives in Seattle. Now, here's an interesting aspect. His current passion is the winter sport of curling, which he has played since 2010, inspired by the Vancouver Winter Olympics. I don't think you'll find too many people with curling, but it is interesting. Brian Booth is the lead account manager for the GSA PBS Information Technology Services Division. Ryan currently serves as the lead account manager in the Office of Public Buildings, Information Technology Services Division within GSA IT. In that role, his team manages the PBS IT governance and budget process, relationships with PBS application owners, as well as the future of federal work programs within GSA IT. Most recently, Ryan led the development of the Workplace Innovation Lab, the WIL, and designed the reservation application customers use to reserve conference rooms and individual workstations. Ryan has been with GSA for over 18 years, working in both PBS as well as GSA IT. Ryan holds a Bachelor of Science in Economics from the Pennsylvania State University and an MBA from the George Washington University. He currently resides outside of Annapolis, Maryland. And now, let me turn this over to our first presenter. Ryan, take it away.
Great, thank you, Dave. And thankfully, I knew I was the first Ryan up. I think this is the first CES session where we've had two Ryans presenting, and both with economics background. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing a bit of back and forth during our presentation. Workplace Innovation Lab, Insights and Application, and I promise to refrain from any curling references. However, if there are any fans of the winter sport of curling, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to have a discussion offline. What we're going to be doing for about the next hour, Ryan and myself, is talking about the WIL, Workplace Innovation Lab. First, we're going to do a brief overview of the WIL, its history, and where we're at. And then I'm going to turn it over to Ryan Booth to really get into the data. We have a bunch of data that we would love to share with you. And much of it, I think that you'll find useful in both applying, taking those insights and using that in your own real estate planning, which will be the third part of our agenda. And then lastly, at the very end, I'm going to provide a very brief teaser, if you will, of what the next iteration of the Workplace Innovation Lab will look like. But first, let's talk about the Workplace Innovation Lab, the original one, the overview. Workplace Innovation Lab came out of our efforts from Workplace 2030. You see there at the bottom of the desks where our concierge staff used to sit. If you ever want to find out more about Workplace 2030, I encourage you to go to our website, workplace website at gsa.gov/workplace. There you'll find more information about the Workplace Innovation Lab, as well as the other workplace strategy offerings that we developed, essentially from our learnings from the pandemic, as well as in consultation with our federal agencies. That started with Workplace 2030, where we have 100 representatives, both industry and federal agency leaders coming together. I believe it was 18 agencies to talk about what types of workplace offerings GSA could potentially provide our client agencies to essentially reboot, if you will, the workplace, make it more future looking, as well as particularly leveraging the technology aspect of it. The Workplace Innovation Lab was one of those offerings that came out of those discussions. Essentially creating a forum, a venue, if you will, in Washington, D.C., that highlighted the different ways that the workplace can be both flexible, as well as vibrant for the staff and be able to adapt to the changing needs of both the federal agency organizations, as well as staff preferences. As we know, the workplace constantly changes, and so the lab basically makes that essentially its ethos, and that it's a living workplace lab where it does constantly change, constantly highlighting what the different industries, furniture, technology, workplace strategy, change management, all those types of different aspects that go into an effective workplace, and presenting those to client agency leaders or visiting staff, either through touring the Workplace Innovation Lab, or jumping down to the third bullet, actually sitting in the lab as a co-working space option. What we want is all of our visitors or all the staff that work there, when they leave the will, what we want it to be is really an inspiration for really thinking about that workplace differently than maybe what someone may have thought that what the office was prior to the pandemic. And of course, always happy to spotlight GSA's mission beyond the workplace, and the Workplace Innovation Lab is a wonderful venue to do that. When the will was created, and I believe it was first opened in January of 2023. Initially, it was going to be a one-year pilot. And what we found, and when Ryan, we get to the second section, when Ryan presents the data, it was not to make it sound too big, but it was very, very successful, both in terms of the amount of interest, just shown by the number of tours for federal agencies, as well as the amount of federal employees that weren't in GSA, well, were employing GSA, that sat in the space, as well as the variety of different spaces. So that while that one-year pilot was the original vision of the will, it has now become essentially almost a standard business model of how to highlight the newest workplace offerings to our client agencies, and to use that to inform the improvement of our overall strategies and service offerings as well. The original Workplace Innovation Lab was roughly 25,000 usable square feet. You see there a floor plan. It was at our headquarters building on F Street and E Street, bounded by 18th and 9th Street, all northwest in Washington, D.C. And it was located on the second floor, roughly taking about 2.5, let's say 2 3/4 wings, if you will. Highlighted there, you see there in yellow. It had 6 unique neighborhoods, each of those yellow sections corresponding to a different neighborhood, which I'll get into a bit more detail in a moment. But throughout the space, there was an opportunity for federal agency, our client agency, their staff, to pop in and use it, maybe for a day, maybe for a week. Many of our GSA employees, as my colleagues, as well as some of our client agency staff, came in much more often than that because they enjoyed the experience, as well as maybe one day trying one neighborhood and another day trying a different neighborhood. From December 23 to basically June of this year, the original Workplace Innovation Lab was downsized to accommodate a couple of different movements that were currently in the building. And then in June, just a couple of months ago, the will was shut down, the original. So what we're going to do is highlight everything that we've known and collected and all the data during this entire period that the Workplace Innovation Lab was up and running. Now, as we talk about this, you're probably asking, well, is the Workplace Innovation Lab going to come back? Yes. At the tail end of the presentation, in the end, I'll preview what the next iteration of the Workplace Innovation Lab will look like in the spring of next year. And throughout this entire period, co-working services are still available to those agencies that wish to have their staff work at our GSA headquarters building. But I'll highlight again some of that when we get into the later sections of the presentation. But what you see there on the map, different enclosed areas, a combination of our enclosed collaboration, if you all noted in blue, the neighborhoods I mentioned earlier, noted in that yellow orangish color, canary yellow, let's just call that, a few cafes sprinkled throughout the space. And one of the things that we also did have is on-site concierge that provided support to whoever may be using the space to do their daily work, as well as to assist in those tours that I mentioned earlier. Now, that's just what most visitors just saw when they toured the Innovation Lab. On top of that is different layers of technology, sensors, also research aspects that went along here. I'm going to change break things up a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and let Ryan talk about the technology a little bit more before we switch back to me again to get into some more of the details of the original will. Ryan, do you want to talk about the technology?
Yeah, so on the map here, you can see kind of different boundaries. Within the lab, we really wanted to focus and place varying pieces of new innovative workplace technology. So in that kind of that red boundary Cisco area, we had devices that were sensors that allowed us to track density and where people were in the space, where was the popular meeting areas. We had environmental sensors tracking air quality, noise levels, humidity, that type of data. Lighting was a big piece. We went into something called PoE, which is power over Ethernet, where we wanted to power some of the devices using kind of low energy models, right? A lot of buildings, smart buildings are going in that direction. We had other cameras and sensors in the building, not recording facial recognition or people, but just counting the number of bodies that were in a certain space, where they were going, where they were gravitating towards. So, you know, those are some of the pieces of technology. Getting a little bit lower in the weeds, and I'll talk about this in a bit, but we wanted to make sure that all of our conference rooms were equipped with the proper video conferencing equipment that could accommodate multiple different platforms, technologies. We wanted to have good sound quality, good acoustics, obviously having a 4K video to make that experience a little bit better for the person, both at home as well as in the office. So those are some of the aspects of what we wanted to kind of invigorate this space with. And then lastly, we wanted to make sure that there was a way where people could easily come into the space, make a reservation. They could use their phone, they could use their machine to book a desk. They get a confirmation, they come in, and they can track all their reservations on their personal profile in the reservation application. So again, I'll get into more of the technology in further slides, but we put a lot of tech into this to showcase what the art of the possible is for the future of work. So Ryan, back to you.
Great, thank you, Ryan. And it does sound kind of odd doing Ryan. Eventually, I'll get used to that. What you see there on the map is these light blue lines noted in the legend on the left, visual and interactive entrance control points, these WebEx boards. If you happen to visit the Will, you probably ran into one of those boards. It's kind of hard not to, quite large. And on those boards was basically this 3D three-dimensional map of the Workplace Innovation Lab, displaying a lot of the data that Ryan just talked about. And we'll also show what the data showed throughout the Workplace Innovation Lab duration. What was really neat about these boards is you can walk up to them, touch them as far as move them around, zoom in on sections, see which rooms were occupied, see what all the different types of data that you see there, and air quality as well. And those types of things. And that technology really added vibrancy to the Workplace Innovation Lab and really showed how far we can create that flexible, adaptive workplace for federal agencies. Now, I mentioned earlier about the 6 different neighborhoods. Through what we called a bailment agreement process, our administrator had there's an authority that essentially allows us to reach out to industry and to install, in this instance, furniture neighborhoods for us on a temporary basis. In response to a request for information, we received a lot of interest in the ones that eventually became part of the Workplace Innovation Lab. I'm gonna highlight here. Part of that process was that for each of these vendors, they would articulate a design approach they wanted to highlight in their neighborhood. So let's just say each 25,000 roughly square feet total. Let's just round it to make it kind of easy. Let's just say each of these neighborhoods were roughly 4,500 square feet or so ish. So for each of the vendors, they had roughly the same amount of area, give or take. They articulated a design approach they would like to see highlighted in the neighborhood, as well as the features that will be presented in their neighborhood. So the first one up, we have Allsdale here, and the asterisk, the big asterisk on the top, leading down to the footnote on the bottom. Just a reminder, these are the vendors that participate in the Workplace Innovation Lab. Of course, I need to say that GSA doesn't particularly explicitly endorse these vendors, and you see the footnote there on the bottom. Now, when Allsteel had their Innovation Lab neighborhood set up, you see their design approach was really looking at thinking about, as far as the user experience coming into the office, what types of activities are occurring both before or after meetings and collaboration, and then create a variety or provide a variety of different features to highlight or support those activities, ranging from those acoustics absorbers. You see that in the image on the right, those top circles hanging from the ceiling, a variety of different workstations for groups. And as far as from the finishes perspective, making it, softening it or making it seem a bit more like home, taking into account that if you're with a hybrid workforce, many of those, if not of those individuals that are work outside the office are very likely working from home, and want to see to what extent we can mimic that experience while still, of course, maintaining a professional government atmosphere, if you will. So that was the all-steel approach. When it comes to Hayworth and Price Modern, it was a little bit different. As far as what they did is they looked at a competing values framework and basically really honed in on the cultural aspect of the workplace, how the workplace can support, let's say, the cultural goals or the desired cultural norms, if you will, for an organization, taking into account that when you're looking at an overall organization, one culture doesn't fit all. There's certainly going to exist microcultures, that was the term used here. And so how do you create a workplace that takes that into account, all those different microcultures, while still leading, supporting some overall business goals? And in this instance, the designs were geared around collaborate, create, control, and compete. And the neighborhoods each supported that, and to help visitors identify this or understand this design approach, the columns you see there in the red, blue, and yellow, and right behind the red is a little bit of the green, highlighted this competing values framework, reinforcing the importance of how workplace can have an impact, hopefully a positive impact, on organizational culture. The third vendor that we had in our neighborhood was Kimball. And this one, it was really highlighting different types of major space types, basing it off research that they've conducted with, I believe it's called Ipsos, and using that to inform, again, using the research to inform the types of neighborhoods, looking at a variety here. And that's a common theme that you're probably seeing in these neighborhoods: variety, mobility, agility, flexibility. In this instance, creating a culture cafe and a hub and a meetup area in Kimball. And one of the nice things about this particular space is just the variety of it. You see there the counter that you can sit up at a little bit higher, but on the other side of that counter is actually some lower seating, kind of like stadium seating, some soft seating. So you actually have two different levels looking at that screen that you see there in the background a bit more. Miller Knoll was our fourth vendor, and this design approach is really honing in as far as the workplace affecting productivity. And in this instance, they collected data through something called a live platform feature. Again, different modes of work, capturing data mobility, something you've heard me say a few times, and a variety of different seating arrangements to support a variety of different postures you see there. In this instance, in the Miller neighborhood, it was also encouraging movement, both with respect to as far as individual workspaces or work points where an individual would sit down and maybe do heads down work, to doing either collaborating with peers in an open environment or maybe in here in a more formal meeting room. And you see there in the background, a lot of technology, big screens, but at the same time, this technology is collecting data, which Ryan's going to highlight in a moment. Swift Space was our fifth vendor and our last one from the furniture industry. This one was pretty much about flexibility and being able to reconfigure the space basically on a moment's notice. Pretty much as you see there in the bullets, one of the big features is that essentially everything was on casters. And what came out of this was something really interesting in that because of that, what we found, one unintended happy consequences, if you will, is that we were able to reconfigure it quite easily for federal agencies who wanted to do larger events in the workplace, in the will, for instance, like a workshop or a leadership offsite retreat. And that was one of the themes that we took away, GSA took away, and is going to infuse into really explore in the next iteration of the Workplace Innovation Lab. So you see that different approaches and different things to focus on, aspects to focus on, were highlighted in the Workplace Innovation Lab. One other thing we wanted to do was really explore the potential and highlight of reusing existing furniture. So the sixth neighborhood was actually one created by ourselves in GSA. It's just like showing the offerings that are currently available on GSA's indefinite delivery and indefinite quantity contracts, as well as the MAS solutions as well through our Federal Acquisition Services Office. At that point, we also highlighted the power over Ethernet that Ryan mentioned earlier, and also continuing to explore those flexible workplaces. 6 neighborhoods, 6 different approaches to the workplace, but a lot of different variables that were explored. On top of that was a ton of tech. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Ryan to talk about this a bit more.
Great, thanks. So I am a little biased. I'm obviously from GSA IT, so I consider myself a technologist. So I personally believe that the technology really makes the dream work. But all things considered, bringing in the latest in innovations of furniture, design aspects, what's working, and also pairing that with technology really gives you, I guess, the best feel for what the space could be, what that art of the possible. So it is a nice intersection of kind of bringing those two sides together. What we wanted to do from a tech perspective in the will was we really want to infuse it with the latest and greatest of how people are working today. Things are a lot different than they were prior to COVID. People were going into the office every day or multiple days a week. Now there's that sense of a hybrid workplace where you have staff scattered across the country, different locations. They're working from all over the place. You want to have that dynamic workplace where everyone feels included, the quality of the work gets done, but that also makes people want to make sure they're feeling connected. So technology does a good job of doing that. So the goal was to bring in tech that actually fused that kind of interaction between folks at home or in the office. So we equipped the will with, we know that different agencies are using different like web meeting platforms. We here at GSA, we're a Google shop. We use a lot of Google suite of tools, but I know our defense communities, Microsoft Teams is very high of what they use. There's WebEx, there's Zoom. So there are multiple platforms that are out there for folks to meet on different web conferencing platforms. So we wanted to have a product that seamlessly allowed folks to join multiple platforms at once. Nothing, it's very hard sometimes for us to connect with another one of our agencies if they're using a different platform. The tech that was in the will, depending on who's in there, it's a click of a button. If you want to get on Google or Teams or WebEx, it's one click of a button. It's easy, it's seamless, no instructions are required. So that's something that we wanted to really emphasize, that user experience, to making things a little easier for folks to connect. I talked a little bit about high performance audio, 4K cameras. No one loves a grainy image. I'm not sure if I'm coming across grainy now, but it's possible. But these devices in the will, the picture, the resolution was outstanding. When you're in a meeting with a 75-inch TV and it's a 4K image, it almost feels like someone's in the room with you. So that was high on our list of requirements. digital whiteboarding. So we'll get to some of this in the data, but one of the things that we found is that a lot of folks came into the WIL not because they wanted to do heads down work or check email or run spreadsheet analysis. They came in with their teams. They wanted to brainstorm. They wanted to have town halls. And so it was nice to have technology that allowed people to be in a piece of the building, 8 people, 4 people, 12 people, and they could have brainstorming sessions. So digital whiteboarding was a function on these boards and monitors where you could draw and text and whatever else, you could copy it, paste it, email it, and you had your notes right there. So that's, again, it's not old technology, but it's technology that works well in a setting that actually has when you have the capability. Ryan mentioned that we had a reservation application. So we did want to make sure that we had a dedicated app where you could go and manage your applications, make reservations, see what space is available, all the way to what times and what days. So we actually built that out specifically for the WIL. We did have a dashboard that paired nicely with the reservation app. So if Ryan mentioned, if someone came into the space, you could literally look at this board and it was very interactive. You could see where the busy places of the building were. You could see which spaces were occupied. You could even drill down to individual rooms and see their temperature, humidity, noise levels. So if you wanted to stay away from a big group of people, you could do that in this space. So it was highly interactive, a very dynamic piece of technology that helped users kind of find where they wanted to be. We in GSA IT were very high on security for obvious reasons. We take very care of our networking piece. So what we did was we worked with one of our partners to stand up a fully air-gapped dedicated SSID network. So we wanted to make sure it was not part of GSA's production network. It was its own isolated network for security reasons. So we wanted folks to feel safe. They were able to work on whatever information they had in the WIL. We did say the WIL was not necessarily work you'd want to come in and work on that sensitive in nature, but we did make sure we stood up with a few fabric layers of security to make sure that network was completely airtight and secure. And then I talked a little bit about sensors, cameras to track overall data and occupancy. So we can jump to the next slide. All right, so Ryan, I think it's time to get into data. So someone might need to ping me if I go over my allotment, because I can probably talk about this stuff for multiple hours, but I will try and be brief. So the WIL itself, after everything Ryan talked about, it was a lab, and we wanted to collect data. And we weren't just going to collect data for no reason. The goal was to collect this data, to process it, and then make informed decisions on the data we collected. So not to put it on a shelf, but we wanted to actually inform not only ourselves of what worked, but we also wanted to, and we see ourselves as kind of that innovative leader from the workplace perspective, not only GSA IT, but PBS. We want to inform you all, the rest of the government and our customers, what actually works, what doesn't work. So we collected all this data, and I'm going to go through several slides that highlights our findings, what we learned, what we didn't learn, things that are still outstanding, a couple of nuggets that we felt were pretty helpful. But this placemat, as I call it, kind of summarizes some of the high-level data that we captured. I'll start in the top left quadrant there. It says 4.4 out of 5. So every person you registered, and you can see just below that 4.4 out of 5, we had over 1,500 registered users federal-wide that signed up, created a profile for the reservation application, and actually logged in and started using the tool. Of the folks who made reservations, each reservation was followed up that day with a survey. And we wanted to, and we know there's survey fatigue, but we really wanted to know how we were doing, what was working in the WIL. So everyone had a voluntary chance to fill out a survey to let us know what we were doing. And those customers who filled out the survey in this question, it was a resounding 4.4 out of 5 of overall experience of when they came into the space, the support that they had from the concierge, the technology, the safety, the security, utilizing the technology. So again, this was the first iteration of what we had, and a 4.4, we felt like we did a pretty good job. We'll see some other data here on the top right. So we had over 5,000 individuals who made a desk reservation. As I mentioned, we had over 1,500 users, and we had over 5,000 individual conference or meeting room reservations. That last bottom left section there, 87%, we did ask folks, hey, you came in, you tried it, but were you over it the minute you got there, or would you actually want to come back in and use the space? 87% of the people who took the survey said, yes, 100%, we will come back to the lab, or we would like to come back to the lab and work. So again, great feedback. We were obviously doing something right. You can see on the right-hand side there are a lot of tours. We had so many federal agencies come through, private sector firms come through, tour the space, ask questions. How did we build it? Why did we build it? Follow-up questions to my team, to Ryan's team. So as you can imagine, this was and even showing from the data, it was a very positive hit for all the federal agencies who had a chance to see it. And that bottom right, we were capturing about 1,000 data points every 10 seconds. So we have a lot of data. I'll try and talk quick. We'll get through it. But next slide, Ryan. So this slide does a pretty good job of understanding volume. Where were the reservations made? Where were things going? So you can see these two lines. The blue line is desks, and the orange line is our rooms. And so we opened in February. We had a decommissioning, as Ryan mentioned there, in November, and we actually closed down in June. So you can see kind of the reservations were all over the place. We kind of February, March, April, the word really wasn't out yet. But we started to ramp out. You can see May, June, July, August through the summer, reservations kind of upticked. People were coming in, people were working from the lab. And then as we got into kind of the later months, I don't know, maybe the weather got colder, people didn't want to be outside, who knows, our reservations kind of went down. And then as you can see, the decommissioning, we had to shut down part of the will due to what we had going on in the building. And so you can see the reservations are much lower. It's not because people didn't use it as much, that they did, but we didn't have as much seating capacity at that time. We really shut down by 2/3. But again, the lab was still working. But for us, this is great because we can see trends in occupancy when people were coming in. Are there busier months? Are people working from home at around the holidays, right? So we can track all that information down to a pretty granular level. Next slide, Ryan. So again, this is just focusing on desks. I don't want to hammer this too much, but again, we were able to track the number of desk reservations by month. And if we really wanted to drill into these pillars a little more of who used that space, how long they used it for, we certainly can. At a high level data, you see the total number of bookings. We had over 5,000 different unique users. We clearly had a lot of repeat users, which is good. And it looks like the average duration or average reservation time for a desk was about 7.5 hours. So people were coming in, spending a full day there, and then leaving and going home. Next slide. I think someone asked the question about neighborhoods and desks. So again, this was a lab. And so Ryan mentioned we trialed several different vendors from technology as well as furniture. And the reason why we did this is that we wanted to see what folks gravitated to, what worked, what didn't, what people liked. And so this chart here allows us to understand from a desk reservation standpoint, Swift Space had the highest number of desk reservations, followed by Herman Miller Knoll, Kimball, Hayworth, All Steel, and then GSA. Now, this chart doesn't necessarily mean preference per se. Swift Space actually had, I think, more desks than some of the others. So they had more volume to offer. It doesn't mean a preference that everyone liked the furniture better in Swift Space, but there were actually more desks to offer. So if the other pods were booked, Swift Space or Herman Miller Knoll might have been the only availability. But we do have preference of what people liked in terms of furniture, and we have that data to support the kind of positivity, negativity around where people like to be within the building. Next slide. All right, so these are rooms, conference rooms. We did realize, again, that conference rooms were more popular. People wanted to come in and have meetings. They wanted a larger group. We had individual folks coming in to work, but the meetings and the town halls and the events were really the focal point of what we saw in the will. Again, you can see kind of the ups and downs, the trends of when people were booking. After the decommissioning there in the November timeframe, you can see our reservations kind of went down, but again, pretty consistent. I think we were maxed out our conference rooms throughout the will. They were, the rooms were hard to come by. People use those a good bit. Next slide. This slide is kind of neat in a sense that our administrator actually asked, she's like, do you guys know what day of the week people like to come in? And I said, absolutely, yes, Administrator Carnahan, we do. We actually saw that the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday obviously were the highest days, Wednesday being the peak day of when people would actually come in and make a reservation. For obvious reasons, Mondays and Fridays were the least that we saw folks coming through the will. Next slide. Again, this is kind of another similar slide, but this is actually on conference rooms. So again, we saw where people were booking. So these are the breakdowns of where we saw the most in terms of conference room reservations. And again, some neighborhoods actually offered more capacity. So that's kind of where we're seeing some of these numbers. The next slide. So this is a really cool slide, and those geeks, IT geeks, I don't mean that in a bad way, but I'm one of them. I love looking at data. And so we obviously, as I said, we stood up our own dedicated secure SSID just for Will customers. And so what we wanted to do was we wanted to track traffic, devices connected, how many visitors did we have coming into the Will. So this really gave us a nice flavor. Now, this is for the duration of the Will. We can really zoom into a day, a few hours, or the entire duration, which you see here. But it gives us an idea of who was in the space, how many connected devices that we had, kind of the traffic. Someone can come in and make a reservation, but they could bring a couple devices. They actually might bring maybe 5 or 6 visitors who came into the building to have a meeting, but there was only one reservation. So this allows us that capacity tracking to see, hey, who's using the space? How many people did we have? And this was pretty helpful to give us that flavor, a little bit different than reservations, more of actual real-time people in the lab with their connected devices. And you can see the average dwell time of a user or of a device, 5 hours. So people weren't coming in for 45 minutes or an hour. They were staying for several hours, and roughly 20% people spent greater than 8 hours. So kind of a flavor for how people were utilizing the space. Next slide. All right, so these slides, the next couple slides are pretty cool, I think, because not only we were tracking kind of the occupancy, but we were tracking factors like environmental. So we were tracking things like humidity, temperature, air quality, noise. And so this really helped us understand to get really granular. So we were tracking in certain rooms, certain areas of the building where the temperature was maybe too hot or too cold. And so we were able to actually alert our building management to say, hey, this part of the building is tracking a little high, it's a little above average. We're seeing our reservations are down for that area. So let's change the temperature. And likewise, if it's too cold, we did the same thing. But we were able to track by specific floor, even by room, what our temperatures, air quality, noise, all of that was doing. And so we were able to really get into the nitty-gritty of the specific environmental data to actually derive some decisions to say, you know what, people actually liked it a lot cooler in the summertime, and in the wintertime, people liked it a lot warmer. So that helped us kind of make some decisions in terms of where the sustainability and the environmental factors need to be. So this is just a snapshot for the month of June, and you can see here just for several days where the temperature fluctuated. We have our highs, our lows, and what our average across the board for the Will was 76 degrees. So again, just different sensors, different type of data, a different view to the data, and different way to actually get to different decisions. Next slide. Humidity, same slide, same concept. Again, we did have more humid parts of the building. For those of you who live in the DMV area, you know that DC is extremely humid. And our friends in the Southern California in the desert, it's not so much. I don't love humidity. I lived in San Diego for a couple of years and loved the lack of humidity. I have some friends in Denver, love it there. But here it's a little swampy at times. So walking to work from the metro when it's 75 dew point is not fun. So we try and keep our humidity in our building comfortable where people feel like they're productive and not sweating over their keyboard. So again, great data to have. A good way to kind of make some decisions. Next slide. IAQ, indoor air quality. Again, this is certainly helpful. We want to make sure that we're putting our customers in a space that has good air quality for obvious reasons. So we were tracking this data as well. Next slide. And then noise. I actually had someone come in while I was in the Will at one point. Ryan, I don't know if you were there or not, but they said, hey, I don't have a reservation, but I'd like to make one. I said, well, okay, well, here's the map. Here's what's available. And they said, can you direct me somewhere where it's quiet? Because they needed to take a call. They were presenting. And so we were able to look at real-time noise levels in the building and direct them to the space of the building that actually wasn't noisy. So anyways, I thought that was a pretty cool dynamic decision that was able to be made from the data that we were collecting. Next slide. Okay, feedback. So I'm not a big survey fan, but in this instance, we really needed to collect user feedback. We wanted to capture if we were doing something right, if it made sense, did it work? So there were several questions that we asked. We didn't want to make it too cumbersome, but we think we landed on some questions that really focused us on certain categories. So we asked a few questions about our reservation application. Some federal customers had no idea that you would actually have to make a reservation to go and sit somewhere. So it was a little bit new. For others, it was second nature. But we wanted to see if it was easy to use. Did it make sense? Did you find the clarity of directions once you got to the building after you made your reservation? Were those adequate, and did you feel comfortable coming into the space? We had questions about furniture, specifically, was it comfortable? How was your experience? Did the desk move? Was it flexible? We had a lot of accessible desks and chairs and monitors that were on stands for people who needed an accessible option. So we wanted to ask these questions to make sure we were reaching all of the associated parties that we wanted to reach, and we were collecting feedback from it. Next slide. My swim lane here on the tech side, we had significant questions, but we wanted to ask overall tech. How did you feel? How was the internet speed? Did you come in there and you couldn't connect to a video call and you were laggy, or was it 4K the whole time? Sound quality was great. How were the instructions we had? A lot of varying technologies in there, and sometimes even for myself, being a technologist, whenever I'm playing with new tech for the first time, I don't know it right away. Like, it takes some time to get used to. Everyone knows Amazon. Everyone knows how to navigate that site and where to go to look for, your past orders or changing your profile. But it takes some time to get used to. So we wanted folks to give us a flavor of like, hey, was it easy to use the equipment? Was it cumbersome? Would you rather just stay at home and use your own stuff, or did it actually make sense to come in? Did we have support with the equipment? And did you feel like your privacy was not vulnerable? Did you feel safe? Did you feel okay coming in there and working with your information from your agency on our network in our building? Right? It's new to everyone. So again, scores across the board. I think Ryan mentioned this earlier. And I mean this wholeheartedly, we never thought that we would be as successful as we actually ended up being. We never thought we would get the publicity or the positivity that came with it. Here we are presenting, well over a year later, and we're standing up another one because of what we learned and because of how positive the experience was. So again, we're going to continue to test, we're going to continue to track, we're going to continue to iterate and make decisions off of the feedback and the experiences that we create in our labs. And hopefully the goal would be to just share that out to other agencies to inform them to make better decisions on their workplace strategy. I think, Ryan, that's our goal. At least I hope it is.
Yes, it is.
All right, next slide. Again, some general questions here. Overall experience, I talked about. Some of these questions were actually a little neat. We actually asked, what would improve your experience? And so these are things we're actually going to try and change. We didn't have any dedicated space to leave personal items, water bottles, book bags, purses, anything like that. This go around, we are actually going to try and put some type of personal space lockers that had digital codes that you could set on your own timeline, and that way you can store personal belongings. So it's things like that we're hearing, we're learning, and we're going to try and actually put into production. And that last one over there, that far right, do you plan to return? 87% yes. I mean, that was amazing. We got such great feedback. So very happy to see those results. Next slide. Let's go one more, next slide. And then, so more will data. So I talked about nuggets and what did we really learn? So this was interesting. As I mentioned, that we had people coming in working individually, and I think that was great. But we had a large portion of our customer base come in with groups. So you can see here, 90% of the top 10 rooms that were reserved across the board, they were our larger rooms. They were our capacity 4 or more. Those were the most popular rooms that we had. And contrary, on the 70% side, the bottom 10 rooms had 3 people or less. So you can see the opposite ends of the spectrum, where people were gravitating towards the larger rooms, and the smaller rooms really didn't even get used. And so taking that one step further, I want to say we had 4 or 5 individual pod rooms And they were great furniture. They were sprinkled with all the different furniture vendors, but there was zero technology in the rooms. We didn't have a monitor. We didn't have any cameras. We had nothing. Those rooms were never used. So we were like, well, we had this great space, but we got to put tech in there. So again, we're learning from that. People don't want to just walk into an empty room. They want to have the collaboration, the technology, the speaker, the monitor, the computer, whatever. So that's something we're going to change. Again, almost half the rooms were made, reservations were made for meeting rooms. Our visitors, again, expressed a ton of satisfaction with what we put together. The support was great. And kind of back to that larger collaboration meeting space. I mean, our administrator, she had done a handful of town halls from the Will. Deputy administrator, same thing. We had other agencies that came into the Will and they took a tour. They came over with their executive leadership team and literally hosted town halls for their agency from our Workplace Innovation Lab. Here are a few photos of kind of, you can see giant collaboration spaces, people moving furniture, making it flexible. We had communities of practice come in. So we almost had like a trade show-esque group come in and showcase some of their products. So again, it lends itself well to that, hey, like I want to get my team in there. We got to brainstorm. We got to work on this project. And so that is our goal for the next iteration of Will, making more open collab, having the ability for folks to come in with their teams and to have the latest and greatest of both technology and furniture. Is there another slide, Ryan? No, I think that's it. So I will pause.
That's it for data. Well, we always have more data slides, but that's it for this session.
That's it for this session.
Thanks, Ryan. So that was just a snapshot of the sheer amount of data that was collected from sensors, reservation data, and also just us witnessing how the space was being used by our client agencies. And go back to the previous slide, it's these events that really was one of those unintended consequences, which was fantastic because we were able to reconfigure the space. And this ended up influencing the design, one of the design goals, the direction for the next Workplace Innovation Lab. But before I get to that, I want to highlight what we learned, some of our insights from this data. The first one is throughout this process, what we found, and this is probably that first bullet is probably the biggest one of all of this, is making sure, and I'm not saying this because Ryan's on this session, but it really is true, is that really need to consider technology at the same time as furniture and make those considerations as early as possible. When we talk about hybrid meetings, hybrid work, creating office workplaces to accommodate those activities, creating an equitable, what's called an equitable meeting experience for both the staff, their individuals that are in the office, as well as those that may be outside the office. The technology consideration is paramount, and doing it as early as possible as well. Of course, we realized, and this is very much common sense, making sure you have that stable, reliable, secure Wi-Fi network in place, and making sure, try to make video teleconferencing as seamless as possible. And that's what Ryan mentioned earlier. And so what we've learned from this is if your agency is contemplating changing your workplace, and the change is more really taking into account hybrid collaboration, these are some of the insights that I offer for your consideration. Certainly, this is the commercial. If you need help on that, just let me know, or let GSA know. We'd be happy to have that conversation as a workplace strategist or workplace engagement conversation, if you will. The other thing that we've learned from the insight is our evaluation focus was we wanted to test all these things, showcase all this great stuff, but also assess what the potential demand was for co-working services. And what you see there is of the charts, the reservation data that Ryan presented earlier, essentially our external customers. So this is, if you take away the GSA employees that use the space, essentially 20% of the individual workstations, as well as 23% of the meeting room bookings, were from individuals outside of GSA. And from us, and looking at the survey result data and the other data we collected, it was very much a strong indicator for potential demand for co-working services, recognizing that, of course, there's certain aspects of that co-working environment that need to be taken into consideration. For instance, a variety of different workplaces, flexibility you see there as far as agencies being able to use the space, maybe using it as their own government innovation lab, if you will, versus just a workplace innovation lab. And then also other more tactical or specific things in a co-working environment, for instance, having concierge staff available to handle the questions that may pop up now and again as someone who's new to a co-working environment, like how do I connect to the Wi-Fi, or how do I make a reservation, those kinds of things. But taking it collectively, we discovered that there is significant demand for co-working service, so much so that you probably heard in past Client Enrichment Series presentations that we do offer federal co-working services in locations across the country, and it's something that we're looking forward to expanding in the future. If you're interested in learning more about this and pretty much anything workplace related, you can always email workplace@gsa.gov, which is our central email account, and we'd be happy to route you to the right program owner that can get you more details, be it co-working, the Workplace Innovation Lab, or the Workplace Engagement Services, consulting services that I mentioned earlier. The other takeaway from this was the importance of the diversity of workplace settings. The first bullet there, and you probably remember this from the pie chart earlier, as far as the number of reservations spread across the 6 neighborhoods, GSA plus the 5 vendors. The fact that it wasn't all just one neighborhood and one configuration that took the majority of the reservations, but rather it was a nice range between that 11 to 21% that you see there, indicates that as far as from the staff demand perspective, that variety is crucial. Now, what that variety is that's specific to your agency or your workplace, that's where that diagnostic research comes in, and learning about how individuals do their work and hybrid collaboration needs and those kinds of things. But it is something that does need to be considered versus the one size fits all approach, or a very, let's say, minimal, yet common type of designer space standard that might be used for a particular location. Change management, of course, and taking into account changes in demand is something that needs to be taken into account, and the diversity of workplace settings, both in terms of neighborhoods, of the bringing together the workstation support spaces, as well as the diversity of the workstations and diversity of those meeting rooms as well, will allow your organization to accommodate those changes in demand, whether it's both in terms of quantity or just in simply the nature of the work that's being accomplished there. So with that, the last section is I'm going to give a preview of what the next iteration of the WIL, and we're calling it WIL 7200. The 7200 refers to the wing in the GSA building that this next iteration of the WIL is going to be in. Just a quick reminder, I'd be remiss because I only see 4 questions in the Q&A pod. If you do have any questions, please put them in the Q&A pod, not the chat. If you put in the chat, we'll of course try to comb through it, but Q&A pod's a lot easier for Dave and our Client Enrichment Series team to find them. Now is a really good time to do that while I do the preview of the next WIL. The Workplace Innovation Lab, or 7200, or WIL 7200, is projected to be open essentially, let's say, spring of next year. During this interim period where Workplace Innovation Lab isn't available for you to visit, we do still offer co-working services for our client agencies using our existing office furniture that GSA has right now. If you're interested in that, a good, easy way, like all these other workplace services, just email workplace@gsa.gov, and then we'll route you in the right direction as far as being able to make that reservation in our co-working service. However, in the spring, next spring, the new WIL 7200 will be open, and we're going to do a couple of different design directions, if you will, largely informed by what we've seen, both in terms of data and personally witnessed, as far as use of the original Workplace Innovation Lab that we've been highlighting so far. One of them, and one of the big themes, is how can we make the workplace increase the adaptability of it and flexibility of it? So if a client agency wants to use the space And the 7200, so it's just one wing, unless they want to use the entire wing. How can they use it and what are some ways to make it the most productive use, if they will? One of those ways is, can we temporarily rebrand the space? So let's say an agency wants to come in and they're doing a workshop, maybe industry affair or something like that, yet they want to be able to rebrand it with that agency logo, have information. So when visitors arrive for the first time, they know where to go, what the agenda is, and all those kinds of things. So throughout the WIL 7200, there's going to be a number of the larger screens that you've seen earlier. What you see here on the right, and I'm going to show a couple of these, are the some of the concepts drawings that were developed to inform the actual design that's going in right now. What's a bit different in this one is all of the design was done in-house by GSA, our interior designers. That was one of the things specifically we wanted to do, is let's do this in-house. Let's really push the envelope, if you will, as far as, again, integration of technology and exploring further these themes that bubbled up, if you will, from the research data from the original WIL. So in this instance, how can we create a workplace that we can temporarily rebrand it for that agency that might, let's say, occupy the entire wing or a significant part of it? And that's what's going to be demonstrated here as one of those things that's going to be shown in WIL 7200. The other one that we wanted to do, and this is really the biggest of the design directions, is evaluation focus at identifying methods, different techniques for continuing to increase the flexibility of the workspaces and accommodating changes in hybrid work styles, be it on an individual basis or an organizational basis. Of course, overlaid all this is a lot of research, collecting the data, same type of data that we've collected before, but also adding in a bit more robust as far as surveys and focus groups and those kinds of things to get into our, as far as the qualitative research aspects of it. This one will have a significant greater quantity of collaboration spaces, and reservations will be able to be made based off of neighborhoods versus individual rooms like it was done in the original WIL, or a very common reservation method. So you'll be able to reserve 1, 2, 3, all of the neighborhoods, depending on availability, of course. The majority of the table furniture, if you will be on casters. What we've learned from the one neighborhood, I believe, was Swift Space, where it was highly flexible as far as moving things around. So let's take it a step further. What if the entire workplace was like that? How can we really reconfigure that space to accommodate, again, changes in demand and need by an organization at that particular day? Lots of screens, really leaning heavy onto the technology. And then also, as we get reservation data and qualitative feedback information from surveys and focus groups and those kinds of things, ensure that WIL 7200 is flexible enough so we can change or just maybe even slightly adjust the designs of the space in response to that data. The other overall evaluation we want to look at is examine to what extent the workplace impact on occupant health and well-being in the space. One of those is what was done earlier. It escapes me which of the furniture vendors did. It's just like create a warmer environment using natural tones and patterns, and really push the biophilic design element aspect of it. And the data that we collect will be, again, through qualitative research from the occupants there, as well as other methods that we're currently exploring. And of course, sensors. Lots and lots of sensors throughout the space, generating all those fantastic graphs that Ryan looked at just for the month of June when it comes to indoor air quality, humidity, and other factors, and really do the statistical heavy analysis as far as to what extent does that impact user demand for those types of space. So those are that's just a couple of the design or evaluation focuses of the next WIL, what we're calling WIL 7200, that will be open for use for federal client agencies as co-working, just like the original WIL, in spring of next year. As we get a bit closer, get to the other side of the calendar year, if you will, you're definitely going to be hearing more about that. But again, as a reminder, co-working services in GSA's headquarters building using our existing office furniture is available for those agencies that need to have their staff work in an office that is in the downtown area. Future updates will continue to be shared through gsa.gov/workplace, or as I plugged a few times already, if you want some more information at any point in time, you can also email workplace@gsa.gov. And of course, our Workscape newsletter as well. With that, I think that covers everything. Ryan, have we left anything out?
I think that's a lot.
It's a lot,
think,
isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think we covered, a lot of the high data points. I think I've been trying to answer questions as quickly as I can in the chat. I think we still have a few. There are a few questions about, outreach and reaching back to us. I don't know, Ryan. I am always willing and available to meet with anyone if they want to talk about reservation systems or anything technology related. I'm more than happy to have a meeting, a conversation, an email, whatever. So please reach out to this staff and get a hold of me. Happy to help where I can. And I'm sure Ryan, you're in the same boat.
Yes, yeah, but not reservation software. I'm just going to direct them directly to you, though.
That's fine.
Dave, I know we're a bit over time, but I could stay on, and I'm sure Ryan can as long as we need to. Is there any questions out there that you'd like us to address?
At this point, I don't believe so. What we would like to do is to thank Ryan 1 and Ryan 2 for a great presentation. I would also like to thank all of you, our clients, who are able to join us. Andrea, are there any other questions or comments that we need to address?
I do see there are a few questions that just came into the Q&A. I think, Ryan, when you made that pitch for them, people responded.
All right,
okay.
bring them.
Bring them. What are they? We'll do our best to impromptu answer.
Let's see, impromptu answers. Here's a short one. Can you share the links to the tech items you used and what worked well?
We can certainly do that. I think, do we have? Yeah, we can do that. Let me get a list of some things together. We can make that available. Maybe we can just add it to a slide here and then make that available.
Perfect. Cool. Okay. All right, we had another question here coming in after the hour. Let's see. According to your map, so I think Ryan was mentioning the areas of access are in certain states. For federal co-working. Will there be more wills coming in the future in more states?
That's a great question, and it's a question we get quite often. Workplace Innovation Lab and co-working. The Workplace Innovation Lab, and I'm not going to go all the way back to the beginning of the slides because it'll give me a headache, and I'm sure everyone as well. The Workplace Innovation Lab is intended to do research, showcase, and try different things. In this instance, co-working services was an additional service offered with the Workplace Innovation Lab. The future WIL 7200, will also have co-working services offered with WIL 7200. We are doing some very early investigations on other wills and other locations that aren't in Washington, D.C., but as you can imagine, just from seeing the data, there's a lot of variables that we need to consider as far as where that might be in the type of will and evaluation focus on that kind of thing. We do have co-working services, and unfortunately, I don't have the map available, co-working locations elsewhere in the country. However, just to be clear, those aren't Workplace Innovation Labs. They're fantastic work environments, robust offices with workstations, and I mean, as far as meeting rooms and everything you would come to expect in modern technology. However, unlike the WIL, those co-working locations are not testing new things or doing the type of research, if you will, that we explore in the WIL. To get you the information on the co-working, or Andre, what we can do is we can certainly include that information as far as if someone's in the slides, just like Ryan's going to add links to tech, we can add in some additional information about the co-working locations and how an agency might can take advantage of that.
All right, we can be sure to include it in your Q&A document too, right? So
of course.
Okay. This is sort of kind of related and building on that theme. Is GSA's long-term plan to take vacated federally owned or leased spaces and create these wills throughout the country? This would ultimately reduce the individual agency leases and reduce the footprint.
Not currently. Certainly, we're always open to exploring different options as far as properly utilizing space and working with client agencies as far as, let's say, an agency is downsizing, and then having a conversation related to the workplace, long-term workplace strategy direction for that agency and the portfolio, for instance, needs in that particular building and market, those kinds of things. With respect to the will, however, there are not plans of doing creating wills in all these different locations where there might be that particular instance or need, for instance. Right now, it's just Will 7200 opening in the spring, some explorations of other potential workplace innovation labs across the country, let's say 2-ish or so over the next year or two. But that's as far as we've gone as far as exploration. With that said, I am always more than happy to have, just like Ryan's more than always happy to have conversations about reservation and technology and software, I'm more than happy to have conversations about labs, ideas as far as how your agency, maybe at a national level, can integrate some of what we've learned into your own workplace planning. And that would be something we'd be more than happy to do offline. And you can reach out to me again at workplace@gsa.gov, or Ryan, stick a dot between the Ryan and Dorfler at gsa.gov, and that's how you can reach me directly as well.
Brian, they just keep on coming. Yes, we've really hit a nerve here. This is a great question, interesting designed question. When building out spaces like the Will in our own agency footprint, does GSA have specialists, maybe in interior design, that can help us ensure we adequately meet the needs and requirements of our disabled population? So to do accessibility reviews and to help think through accessibility and design.
Yes, certainly. So as far as meeting accessibility and design requirements and ABAS and those kinds of, and I am not an accessibility and design expert by any means, so I'm not going to go too deep into that. However, we definitely have experts in that area. And when it comes to the design of an office space, certainly that is a consideration. If your agency wants to take it a step further beyond the requirement, and there's a specific design direction you would like to see in your workplace, we do have experts, both architects, interior designers, workplace strategists, and certainly we have consulting partners that we can also access, and no pun intended, but reach out to rather, that can address those design goals, if you will, when it comes to accessibility. Same goes from any other type of design or workplace strategy perspective. So for instance, if health and well-being in the workplace is something that your agency is really keen on and you're like, really want to go for it, we definitely have some experts or workplace strategists and interior designers can help facilitate that discussion. Same thing, let's say it's infusing neuroscience and design and taking into account those individuals who happen to be or who are rather neurodiverse, which is one of those emerging things that we're looking into. That's also something that we would be thrilled to investigate with your agency as well. A good starting point to do that conversation, I know I say it a lot, is email workplace@gsa.gov, and we can get that conversation going.
All right. The next, we've got 2 questions that came in that are kind of very specific to the equipment that was used in the space. Okay. So we're looking for, one question is asking about articulating arms that work well with dual monitors to help it. Or, so that's one question, like, what kind of, products or solutions did you find for that? And the other one, in a related way, is how do you make adaptive workspace furniture, things that are on casters, kind of work when you have monitors and sit-stand desks which require electricity and computer connections? Like, how do you make that cool?
Hey, Ryan, I'll take the first one with regards to the equipment. Yeah. So I guess to answer this in a, I guess as good as I possibly can, is that this is one of the reasons why we made sure in the Will, and we're encouraging folks to do the same, is when you're doing the design, you bring technologists as well as the design folks together at the same time, because that really helps both sides understand the dynamics of the actual space. The question about the specific arms, we GSA and obviously our acquisition side, I mean, there are so many different arms that are out there that work, but the way we do things is that we look at the space itself and see which arms might work for that specific niche of space. And kind of how we want the arms oriented, the size of the monitor that we're going to put on there. All the mounts are generally the same type of mount. But when we did the will, we actually made the furniture vendors provide, depending on how they were designing the space, what the use case was going to be. Some of the spaces didn't need dual monitoring arms. Some of them maybe needed one, or we were going to have a laptop and a monitor. So we really actually worked with the furniture vendors and told them what our technology requirements were, and then they are the one to actually design what arms and how that design would look. So we kind of put the ball in their court after we gave them our requirements. That second question, I think, was with regards to casters and work built-in monitors. I don't know, Ryan, this one is, I know that, that what we're designing now is that we have a couple pods in spaces where we know that we're going to want movable TVs in certain spaces. And so it all depends on kind of our design and again, getting the furniture and getting the workplace team along with the technology folks to make sure that the requirements are in sync, I think, from my perspective.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm just trying to remember how the neighborhood, the highly flexible neighborhood in the original will, where the screens were at. Actually, there wasn't screens. That's right. It was just, oh no, there were some screens. And there was, in some instances, it was tethered, if you will, to where the power was at.
Yeah.
In the next workplace innovation, Will 7200, that flexibility aspect, and this is a great question because I neglected to bring it up. That flexibility of the furniture, we're also going to explore on the technology side. There's battery packs, that could larger, bigger ones, that where the plan is that we would have those available. And so when someone works in the Will 7200, they can check in with the concierge, and the concierge, the user experience is this. So the concierge asks them, would you like a battery pack? And they say, or come back at any point and get a battery pack. And they can take that battery pack someplace in the Will 7200. Maybe there's not an outlet nearby. And so given with that type of technology, that does increase the flexibility tremendously. With regards to the question that was brought up, it's like, how do you deal with the screens? And how do you deal with the other technology that you may have to plug in? We also, part of that is also really relying, again, that stable, secure Wi-Fi, and not relying on Ethernet cores, if you will, for all of the connections. So those are the things that we are going to be exploring in Will 7200. And I'm really glad that this person brought up that question. Yeah.
Okay, there are just a few more. Let's see. This individual would like to know, are you seeing any demand for like the ratio of touchdown spaces versus reserved spaces?
That one's a tricky one because if we go you can go strictly off the data from the Workplace Innovation Lab. And the thing we have to remember is it's a temporary environment where lots of different organizations are coming in and using that space a variety of different times. And it's not like one stable organization using it over and over and over again. And that's one of the caveats on the data is we have a lot of different organizations coming in, individuals that are curious, individuals that are really like, this is fantastic, I want to come back again, but just a wide variety, which is great for assessing overall demand. It gets tricky when you're using that figure to come up with, let's say, the ratio that the person mentions there. It's actually better to take a reverse the discussion, is have the conversation with the organization as far as what's the work the nature of the work they're trying to accomplish and how they would see themselves working in the future. Then creating the, let's say, benching station or individual work points ratios based off of that activity-based planning, if you will. Same type of approach that goes into how many open collaboration areas or how many 4-person meeting rooms or larger meeting rooms, those kinds of things. It's going to vary depending on the work that's being accomplished. And we take into account certainly an organization that's assigned to that space versus a space that's not really assigned for one organization, but allows lots of organizations to work in it like the will is. So unfortunately, there's no magic number, but as always, we're more than happy to continue that conversation offline. Whoever's interested.
And Ryan, I'll just to take that one step further, just from our very specific use case, I think, Ryan Dorfler nailed it. There's no right or wrong percentage. However, personally, from what I've seen, I think that there is a value to having some percentage of touchdown spaces. And the reason why I bring that up is because if you think of a very specific use case, at least what we saw, is that generally office workers, they wanted to come in, they can do their heads down work at home. They'll come in with a team and they're having breakout sessions, right? And there's that collab, but your entire day doesn't revolve just around collaboration. And what we've seen is that people come in, they book the entire will out, they're all in there, but maybe someone needs to take a private call somewhere, or someone needs to go and run some analysis for 30 minutes, come back to that collaboration session and present to them, right? If the entire will is booked, they can't really go anywhere. They don't have that private space. So the touchdown spaces block off reservations, and they can say, hey, I'm going to step away for an hour, 30 minutes. I'm going to go sit in this private area where I can have a touchdown. I'll do my work. I'll take my call, whatever it might be. And then they can come back to their collaboration, whatever, or their group setting, and then they're on their way, right? So to me, I feel like there definitely is an inherent value to having some level of available spaces that are touchdown. But the percentage of which you want to allocate, I think it really depends on, you need to look at your overall goal and mission and what your use case is going to be. But that's just something that I've seen that we learn, and we actually created the will in that design for that very reason.
All right. All right, guys. There's one more question in the queue here. So this one's kind of asking your opinion and in your observations. We are all living in that environment of uncertainty of various return to work policies that different agencies are instituting. In your observation, do you feel that having these wills or these co-working spaces have become so established that they are essentially becoming part of the fabric of everyday work life? Meaning, are wills here to stay?
Well, in my opinion, I hope so, but I am a bit biased in that regard. When it comes to creating a work environment for a hybrid workforce, absolutely. What that looks like, is it a space that maybe it's reduced, but it does take into account, let's say, employees that come in, staff that comes in 2 days a week. You could have a very traditional, very conventional type of workplace setting with offices and workstations and collaborations, all that kind of thing. And on top of that is a bunch of telework, and you have a hybrid work environment. Or you can do a workplace strategy that leans on, let's say, co-working services provided by another entity, for instance, like GSA, while also having maybe an anchor space, if you will, that's smaller for that federal agency that's more connected to special, the mission critical types of spaces, if you will. If your agency is interested in doing research in a particular area and it's within, let's say, your established authorities, maybe a will is something that you all might be right for you. I can't speak to the different authorities of the different agencies. For us in GSA, that was part of the conversation, is why are we doing this? How does the information or data we learn, the insights we learn from the Workplace Innovation Lab, allow us to better fulfill our mission to our client agencies? And that's why it's very heavy on workplace design, technology, data collection, and those kinds of things. And it was, so for us, the will is very much strongly connected to our overall mission, and as far as and providing those effective workplaces to our client agencies. Whether a will and a research type workplace is right for another agency to do on their own, it's impossible for me to say. That's really one of those soul searching types of things. Hopefully I kind of answered the question, but dodged it in a somewhat meaningful way. I'm not sure, there's a lot there. But again, always happy to have a more in-depth conversation offline.
All right. Well, I didn't see any new questions come into that Q&A pod, so I think you guys have wrapped that up.
Well, I mean, the biggest takeaway I have is that Ryan Booth is obviously Ryan 1, as Dave mentioned, and I'm Ryan 2, yes.
All right. We're going to go with that. That might stick.
Oh, I'm sorry I said that, but anyway. All right, I think we have one more slide, Dave. You want to wrap us up?
Yes, I can do that. As we've said, we're going to post this session slide deck and the recording and a question and answer document for future reference on the website. Now, we've got another great class coming up later this month. Taming timeliness. Developing a realistic project schedule and managing to that schedule is a key component of project success, as we all know. Attend this session to learn about the key elements of project schedule management. As we all know, the goal of the Client Enrichment Series is to engage our audiences in workplace topics that contribute to mission success and to effective management of your real estate and workplace programs. Thank you again for attending and have a wonderful rest of your day.